Welcome back to Conversations with Therapists. Today I'm joined by Michal Cohen of Therapy with Michal. Michal, thank you for being here.
Hi, Deborah. I'm really excited to be here.
So, Michal, you have this beautifully holistic, trauma informed approach that blends deep childhood exploration, somatic work, mindfulness, and even psychedelics when clients are open to it. How do you decide what each client needs and what that integration actually looks like in the room?
So I would say that I listen to the person, not the problem. And what does that mean? That means that there's no cookie cutter one size, like one way to work with somebody. I meet people where they're at and I make a decision what they need in that moment. So every session is really tailored to that unique individual and what's going on in their life. So for some people, right, like for example, if somebody recently had a traumatic event happen to them, they might need some nervous system regulation skills, right? They might need some grounding techniques before we're even talking a lot about what had recently happened. They might need something that's just going to help them feel a little bit calmer right in that moment because they might be in a very anxious state. Another person who's maybe coming to me to look at relationship issues, we might start by looking at their childhood to understand the origin of certain relational dynamics. And another person, maybe if someone has ADHD, we might start with some mindfulness skills to help them feel more capable of whatever task they need to get done or help them with attention. What happens in the session is really a moment by moment, me connecting with the person, figuring out what's the best tool that I have to meet them with in this moment. And then when we think about integration, it's sort of like weaving in all these different modalities, almost like a painting, right? We do this color now, we do this color now, and we just kind of are creating your most authentic version of yourself by weaving in these different pieces.
Going off of one of the examples you just gave, ADHD is one of your specialties, and you talk about embracing quirks rather than hiding them. What does that look like to help someone shift from I'm too much slash not enough to actually owning their strengths and living with more clarity?
I love that question. So, because oftentimes, right, someone with ADHD, whether they were diagnosed from a young age or not, they usually grew up with messages like, just try harder. What's wrong with you? Just pay attention, right? And so that usually, if they're an adult and they're coming to understanding that maybe they have ADHD, they usually have this belief that something's wrong with me and my brain is broken. So when I work with people, first we start with honoring the truth that a different brain doesn't mean an inferior brain. A different brain doesn't mean less than or broken. People have been so conditioned to think something's wrong with me. And then I also help people understand and look at the gifts that can come with ADHD, because a lot of times people with ADHD, they might be the out of the box thinker that has a solution. They might be a very creative person, a very artistic person. So I really help people understand just how their brain works using compassion instead of shame, curiosity instead of shame, because a lot of times there can be a lot of shame, like I can't do this thing that everyone else seems to be able to do. That must mean something's wrong with me. And it's more about, okay, so you can't do that thing. Maybe we don't have to make that mean anything's wrong with you. Maybe we just try to figure out what environments are best suited for someone whose mind works the way your mind works. I have ADHD, and sometimes even in a session, I might have a thought of something I want to say, and then I don't want to interrupt the person, and then I forget the thought. When I was younger, I would be like, oh my God, like I'm so freaked out. I can't remember. I'm spacing out. Like I would think, well, because I've spaced out for a moment, some things I'm not good enough. But now I just sometimes I tell my clients, wow, I just lost track of what I was meaning to say. Just give me a moment. Those types of shifts where like now I accept how my mind works. And when I show that to other people, usually they're not having a problem with that. It's about helping people just accept that your mind works a little bit differently, but that differently isn't less than. And that helps empower people to have more confidence. And with more confidence comes more clarity.
I know from hearing people in my own life who struggle with ADHD that they feel frustrated that they can't just sort of have a normal brain, have a normal functioning neurotypical brain. But what I like about your approach is that you're focusing on how can we use this as a superpower? How can my ADHD be adaptive rather than maladaptive? And how can I lean into the fact that this is who I am, how my brain works, and how can I use that to show up in the world? I also really like that you use your own personal experience and your own personal journey with your ADHD to empower your own clients. I think that's really special when you're sitting across from a therapist and the therapist can actually relate to what you're going through more or less and has their own approach and their own journey that they've been through. And you can then impart that onto whoever's struggling to help them and empower them to be the best versions of themselves.
Yes, and I feel like you totally understood me, really, like you really got what I was saying. And that's really the heart of how I like to work with people. Because yeah, I mean, when you feel shame about how your mind works, it kind of constricts and shrinks your life. And so once you help remove that shame and just help a person accept your life just begins to expand.
A lot of people listening and a lot of people in general are burnt out, people pleasing, or stuck in the same draining relationship patterns. How do you help clients uncover where these cycles started and, more importantly, start breaking them for good?
Usually, all of these patterns are rooted in childhood. That's the lens that I like to look at things through. I like to guide clients in a very gentle way to trace a thread of what kind of dynamic was there in their childhood that might have shaped you to sort of end up in this type. If it's a burnout, right? Maybe what keeps a person in a toxic environment is a question we might need to ask versus if it's not burnout, right? If it's more understanding people pleasing, something like that. This isn't my quote, but there's a quote that's every people pleaser started out as a parent pleaser. So with the lens that I use, we're going to go back, explore into your childhood to sort of understand who did you have to become to feel safe, loved, or accepted, and what parts of you you had to dim to survive a certain environment. It's never about blaming a person's family because there's so much multi-generational trauma that our parents are always doing their best based on their capacity. And so even when parents are doing their best and love us, we still may have needs that didn't get met. So to answer that question again, it's about tracing things back. So I help people find the root cause of why you're in a certain type of dynamic in a relationship or workplace. And then when you talk about breaking patterns, I would say that's not just a singular event. It's more of like a practice because we start noticing, oh, this pattern again feels familiar. And we would I also combine mindfulness because when we're trying to interrupt patterns, we just practice noticing a pattern, right? We first notice it. And the more that we notice something, then we're able to notice, oh, I have a space between myself and these choices I can make. And that space can sometimes look like different boundaries, getting more comfortable with saying no, things like that. Then the breaking of a pattern becomes a practice that over time, a person will then start to see big shifts in their life. And, some of those tools, like I said, again, are getting comfortable with saying no. Some of us didn't grow up with any boundaries, and some of us grew up with a lot of boundaries. So wherever we fall in that spectrum, we can always do a deeper dive into boundaries because boundaries play a big part in our mental health.
That quote kind of hit me. I'm still thinking about the every people pleaser started out as a parent pleaser. I think it's really powerful to think about how our formative years can really form us and how it's important to start there. And the first step is, like you said, noticing. But in that, there's this beautiful feeling of you're just noticing. You're not immediately trying to act. You're not immediately trying to put a band-aid on the situation. You're just noticing. And I think that coming to sort of a people-pleasing cycle or a burnt-out cycle, any sort of cycle with, okay, this is happening, but it's not your fault. And let's start there just with noticing from a neutral, curious place is, I think, a really wonderful approach.
Yes. Yeah. And like to piggyback on something you said earlier about every people pleaser started out as a parent pleaser. This is a really I'm just going to give a trite example, but it just kind of will help illuminate that point. Like, have you ever heard a saying, we don't, I mean, this is just to make an example, like where a child is crying and a parent might say, stop crying, or I'll really give you something to cry about.
Hmm.
So it's like sample that child then learns, oh, my sadness, my tears aren't acceptable. And then that part has to get pushed down. So then that child learns, oh, to stay in relationship with my parent, I can't show when I'm sad. I can't show when I'm crying. That is where that origin of the pleasing comes. I have to maintain my connection with you, I have to suppress my authentic self.
Shifting gears a little bit, you're passionate about cannabis and mental health, and you're even starting a podcast called Living the Green. While it's not a one size fits all approach, and most of your clients don't use cannabis, how do you explore it thoughtfully with those who might benefit? And what do you wish more people knew about its potential role in mental wellness?
Cannabis, yes, is one of my favorite topics to talk about. The decision that I make about how to explore cannabis use with a client is twofold. One is, say a client is presenting to me with certain symptoms, right? And it could be, oh, I'm having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or I'm having a lot of anxiety, or I'm going through a tremendous loss and I have a lot of grief. Each of these could be cannabis could be used for any of these symptoms. It's not a one size fits all either. So, safety is always the number one important thing to me. So if I share this information with someone and and then they're more open and curious, then we're going to talk more about it. Some of my clients are not wanting to use any kind of drug or plan at all. And I always respect that, because everything I do is a collaboration with someone. I'm never going to say, you need to do this. Like, no, like, you have your truth and I'm just there to support you in your truth. That's the first thing that comes to my mind with cannabis, is just if a person is having any of these symptoms. And we could have a full talk just on the cannabis, but because I do want to say, anxiety, for some people, cannabis can increase anxiety, and for other people, cannabis decreases anxiety. So that's again where it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's more of an individual thing. And we talk through different concerns to see whether this could be a good thing to try out, or maybe it wouldn't be a good thing for you to try out. Then the second question that you asked is something I wish more people knew about cannabis. So many things it's hard to just distill it to one thing. But cannabis, it's such a miraculous plant in that it treats a million different conditions. And how many other things that are a natural growing plant can treat such a variety of things? Like that and of itself really is amazing to me. Another thing that's amazing to me is that cannabis can be used, one, for symptom management, but cannabis can also be used as a psychedelic. And in my opinion, it's one of the safest and gentlest psychedelics. Symptom management is one thing. Psychedelic journeys are sometimes ways to get to the root of something, or really bring more awareness to something we're carrying within ourselves. So the fact that cannabis can be used in that way I just think is amazing. Just say one more thing, that I really wish there was less stigma around something that has been used in so many different cultures. It was actually used in Judaism. They found resin at one of the temples. Cannabis has such a rich history, and a lot of that history was sort of washed over by the war on drugs and incorrect information we were given about cannabis.
Sort of like you said, we could definitely do a whole episode just on this because it's fascinating. I think that this is something that, even though cannabis has been around, like you said, for a very, very, very long time, I feel like now, especially as psychedelics sort of pick up steam in pop culture and in use for mental health issues and just in general, like you said, self-discovery, slowly, I do feel like the stigmas are being peeled away a little bit. I do think gradually people are becoming more and more open to cannabis and its true healing powers. Very curious to see how its use will progress in mental health treatment, how more and more clinicians will be open to discussing it with clients, or just, psychoeducation. What is cannabis really, and how can it be used to benefit the right people?
I love all the things that you're saying, so we can always do a whole separate episode. But yeah, and I agree with you too that things are starting to shift slowly. But I actually think there's still a huge bias among therapists. A lot of therapists will really judge their clients' cannabis use. And so that's another thing I would love to see that changed, where a therapist is more curious, because cannabis, just like any other drug, it's never the drug that's the problem. It's the relationship a person has with the drug. But oftentimes we demonize the drug, for lots of reasons. But these things it's always, even television, right? It's like television is fine if you are, watching it for entertainment. But if you're watching it all day, every day and not working, then it's problematic. So it's always the relationship we have something instead of the thing itself, and knowing how to use, if it's something like cannabis, always knowing how to use something safely with the right education.
So I feel like we only scratched the surface on a bunch of these topics, but to wrap up for now, for anyone listening who's ready to feel more grounded, confident, and connected to themselves, what is one powerful step they can take today to begin creating the life and patterns that truly support them?
I would say that most powerful step would be to embrace compassion with yourself, because so often, right, we will be so hard on ourselves. Like if we make a mistake, how do we talk to ourselves? And we normally would never talk to a friend the way we would talk to ourselves. You may not be able to start right away just treating yourself with compassion, but what you can start with is noticing that, there we go again, just noticing what your self-talk looks like. Are you being hard on yourself? The truth about compassion, I like to think that we can all be word witches with ourselves. The words that we use with ourselves can either nourish us and give us energy, or the words that we talk to ourselves with can deplete us and even make us feel shame. How amazing is it that we get to choose those words? Like we have full choice, full freedom over how we choose to talk to ourselves. And so for me, compassion, because I personally, I think the world needs more compassion.
Just hearing you speak that about this, and just the way you light up when you speak about how we have the power to be our own word wizards, as you put it, it makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy. Like we are so powerful. We really can dictate a lot of our lived experience and the way that we relate to ourselves and how we show up in our own minds and our own bodies. And I think that that's really empowering. I want to say thank you so much for being here today. I learned a lot, and I know that whoever is listening learned a lot. I'm excited for people watching to be able to reach out to you, explore your website, learn more, and we'll hopefully have you back here maybe to talk about cannabis in the future. Who knows?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Devorah. It's been so great chatting with you. And yeah, I'd love to reconnect again and do deeper dives into some of these topics.